Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the kind of place that makes a haunted house feel like a five-star spa retreat. Picture this. It's late evening, and you trudge down a muddy road somewhere in the heart of medieval England. Your boots squelch through something that might be manure, or just very enthusiastic moss, and the chill in the air cuts through your cloak. Up ahead, a lantern swings in front of a crooked wooden door, the local inn. Shelter, warmth, maybe even a meal. But as you step inside, the smell hits you like a blunt mace to the face. This, my friend, is where your regrets begin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door creaks closed behind you with a sound like old bones grinding. The light is dim just, a few smoky candles, and a low fire that pops like it's trying to scare away guests. Your nose twitches. It's hard to describe the scent exactly, but imagine someone spilled cabbage soup on a goat, locked it in a closet for 3 weeks, and then asked it to fart. There's the pungent funk of wet wool cloaks drying near the fire, the must of straw that's seen too many seasons, and the earthy tang of unwashed bodies who've walked the same roads as you, but maybe haven't met soap in a decade. No one looks up. A couple of farmers are hunched over pewter mugs, eyes dull from a day of threshing, or maybe just from the beer witch, by the way. Historians still argue whether it was technically beer or just some unhopped porridge. Water cousin. In the corner, an old woman is picking something from her teeth with a chicken bone. The fire doesn't warm the room so much as stir the stench. This, you realize, is where people have to stay, not choose to. There are no cozy inns with fresh linens and a chocolate mint on the pillow. You take what you can get, and right now, you get a stool that rocks on 3 legs, and a welcome that feels like it's daring you to leave. The innkeeper shuffles over, one eyebrow missing, and the other doing all the emotional heavy lifting. He gestures vaguely toward a wooden board nailed above the hearth. Pay in advance. No brawling. No dying inside. That last bit is probably meant as a joke. Hopefully. He points you toward a corner where a communal pot bubbles ominously. Whatever's in there is mostly grey, occasionally pink, and entirely unidentifiable. You're not hungry anymore. Anyway, you find a seat beside the fire, wedging in between a knight passed out in his armour, and a merchant who smells strongly of onions and despair. The knight shifts, groaning, and you hear something crunch under him that might be bones, or just another unlucky rat. That's when it truly hits you. You're not in for a restful evening. You're in for survival. This inn isn't an oasis. It's a purgatory with splinters. The walls lean like they're reconsidering their job. The ceiling drips in one corner, and no one has bothered to place a bucket under it. It's just accepted that the floor will be damp. You can't tell if it's from rain or something worse. And then, the sound. Not a roar, not even a shout, just an endless medley of coughs, mutters, snores, and occasional shrieks from upstairs. One man bursts out of a room, pants half down, eyes wild. He says nothing, just walks out into the night barefoot. Everyone ignores it. This is normal here. You begin to notice the floor is sticky in places. The innkeeper, seeing you look down, grunts, "Beer," but you suspect that's generous. Another corner is occupied by a dog with one eye and a very deliberate growl. You don't ask questions. This might seem like a dramatic overreaction to a bad Airbnb, but understand, medieval inns weren't places of rest. They were nodes of necessity. You didn't stay because they were nice. You stayed because dying of exposure was marginally less comfortable. And at least here, you might die with a roof overhead. Even luxury was relative. An upscale inn in a major town might offer you a private room, a small fire, maybe even a clean bowl. But here, in the countryside, that's fantasy. The average traveller had to accept fleas, food poisoning, and the unsettling awareness that something is always watching you from the shadows, from behind the bar, or maybe from inside the walls. And still, there's a certain charm if you squint. The fire crackles. The ale might be suspicious, but it's warm. A bard in the corner plucks a lute string absent-mindedly, singing a ballad so slow and tuneless it feels like your brain is melting. But hey, it's music. Sort of. Still, you start to feel it, the creeping realization that this place is less a rest stop and more a test. One that only the drunk, the desperate, or the historically unaware willingly attempt. You are officially among them now. So go ahead, take a breath, if you dare. That first whiff of regret isn't going anywhere, and we've only just begun. The staircase groans beneath your feet like a dying cow every time you take a step. It's not just old as if it's actively trying to reject your existence. You've handed over a few grimy coins for a room, and the innkeeper muttered something about second on the left, if the door's still there. Encouraging. As you reach the top, the corridor tilts slightly to the right. Either the whole building is sinking, or that ale was stronger than it tasted. The hall is dark, except for one flickering candle jammed into a rusted sconce. Your hand brushes the wall for balance, and instantly regrets some sticky, unknown residue clings to your fingertips. It smells faintly of mold, iron, and fish. You wipe your hand on your tunic. It doesn't help. Your door creaks open, barely hanging on one hinge, and you step into the room you'll be calling yours. Although legally, spiritually, and physically, it feels more like you've broken into someone else's misery. The ceiling is low enough that you instinctively duck. There's a single window, if you can call it that. A rectangle of warped, greasy horns scraped thin to let in the faintest hint of moonlight. No glass. It's not drafty, it's just air with walls pretending to matter. And then you spot it. The bed. You'd think that would bring a moment of relief, maybe even joy. But this bed does not inspire joy. It inspires caution. It's little more than a wooden frame with a sagging sack of something organic on tofe, probably, though it could just as easily be a blend of straw, lice, and misplaced hopes. You edge closer, squinting. Then you see them. Movement. It's not the wind, not the flicker of the candlelights, the mattress. Pulsing, almost imperceptibly, with tiny lives. You realize with a kind of medieval horror that this bed doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, the size of breadcrumbs. You back away instinctively, but there's nowhere else to go. The floorboards gape with cracks big enough to lose a toe in, and the only chair in the room looks like it once lost a duel with a bear. Historians still argue whether medieval inns truly had infested bedding as the norm, or whether that's an exaggerated slander passed down by moralizing monks. But let's just say, no one has ever described medieval lodging as hygienic. In fact, beds were rarely changed, maybe once a season, if that. The same stuffing would be used for years, sometimes decades, passed down like heirlooms, except, instead of fine silver, you inherit skin rashes and pet parasites. You sit gently on the edge of the bed, trying to make peace with it, and immediately regret it. Something inside the sack squelches. You don't know what it was. You don't ask. The pillow, if you can call it that, is a lump of fabric filled with coarse sheep's wool, or maybe millet husks, something crunchy and totally indifferent to your cervical spine. You lie back, and your neck bends at an angle that makes you consider religion. But you're not alone. You hear it first, a tiny rustle near your ear, then another, then a third, near your knee. You sit up so fast you nearly clock yourself on the beam overhead. The candle flickers violently. You peer into the mattress stuffing, and yes, confirmation. A silvery ripple of movement. Not just bugs mice. Possibly a whole family. Possibly with names. You leap to your feet and consider sleeping on the floor instead. But when you kneel down to inspect it, you find a trail of droppings that make the bed seem like the better option. Just barely. Your options have narrowed to sleep with parasites or sleep with vermin. And honestly, there's probably no clear winner. Still, your body is exhausted. You lie down again, curled up like a pretzel, trying to avoid as much contact with the surface as possible. You pull the woolen blanket over yourself. It smells like a combination of wet dog and unresolved trauma. You don't know what year it was last washed. Possibly never. Just as you begin to close your eyes, there's a sudden jolt, a sharp pinch on your thigh. You fling off the covers and catch sight of a flea, bold and bouncing. You squash it more out of panic than heroism and lie back again, heart racing. You think about home, or rather, about how this makes you redefine home. A place without bugs in the bedding, a place with actual soap. You almost miss the road, which is saying something, considering earlier you slipped in horse dung and met a monk who smelled like vinegar and death. You try not to move much, not to scratch, not to think about what's crawling in your hair, but it's no use. Your skin itches, your scalp tingles. You become aware of every follicle, every whisper of motion, and then there's the sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Is it in the mattress? In the walls? In your own imagination? You don't know. You don't want to know. You try to distract yourself with the lullaby hum of the tavern below. You can hear muffled laughter, the occasional thud of a tankard, someone coughing hard enough to lose a lung. The bar downstairs hits a sour note, so violent. Even the fleas seem offended. Somewhere in the building, a baby wails. Somewhere else, a man snores like a dying ox. This is your reality now. And honestly, it's not even the worst part. That comes later. Much later. But for now, just try to sleep. If you can. Your dreams are chaotic, if they can be called dreams at all. Half asleep, you imagine beetles weaving tapestries in your hair, monks chanting in the next room, and a chicken gently pecking at your toes. But then you wake and realize the chicken wasn't a dream. It's perched on your windowsill, staring at you like it knows something about your past. You sit up, groggy and stiff. Every joint complains, your skin feels filmy, and your neck has formed an alliance with gravity in a rather vengeful way. There's straw stuck to your cheek, a suspicious red welt on your wrist, and a general sense that sleep has somehow made you dirtier. You glance again at the bed. The mattress has shifted overnight, as if it rearranged itself while you weren't looking. Probably not out of spite. Probably. Now, you might think the bedding situation couldn't get any worse, but you'd be wrong, because now comes the moment you lift the top layer and see what's underneath. Not clean sheets, not even a second blanket, just more straw. Dry, splintery, poking out in weird places straw. And something hardwood? No, a rock, an actual rock. You toss it aside and then find a shard of ceramic, which may or may not have been part of someone's dinner. At some point, someone clearly just stuffed trash in here and called it a bed. Mainstream historians agree that beds of the period were stuffed with whatever was cheapest and most available. Hay, moss, dry leaves, and sometimes rags. But quirky findings in archaeological digs have turned up stranger things like animal bones, fish scales, even bits of rope wool woven into the stuffing of peasant bedding. Why? No one's really sure. Some say it was for insulation. Others think it was just laziness. Or maybe folk beliefs, warding off demons with eel spines. Classic. You rise and stretch, or attempt to. The low ceiling has you hunched like a gargoyle. You bang your elbow on the beam and nearly topple the one-legged chair. There's a small basin in the corner filled with yesterday's water, or possibly last week's. Pass. There's a filmy skin on top that looks like it might slither away if touched. You decide to pass on the morning wash. Now, if you thought you might at least change clothes to feel human again, too bad. Your bag's still damp from yesterday's rain, and your other tunic smells like someone boiled onions in a boot. So you layer up, hoping the lice will just get confused and die. Then comes the true insult. The blanket, if you didn't notice last night, is only half the length of your body. It covers either your feet or your shoulders, never both. The medieval innkeepers weren't running a wellness spathe, were providing the bare minimum to keep you technically alive. Some inns didn't even offer beds unless you paid extra. In worse ones, people had to share beds with strangers. Yes, with strangers. That kind of arrangement led to some truly unfortunate nighttime entanglements, and the occasional knife fight over blanket rights. Historians still debate whether these shared bed arrangements were out of necessity or a grim form of social bonding. Either way, you don't feel very bonded. You feel itchy and a little violated. Your attempts to fluff the pillow result in a small cloud of dust. You sneeze so hard it echoes down the corridor. Somewhere nearby, someone groans, possibly in pain, possibly in judgment. You step to the window to catch some fresh air. But remember, this is medieval England. Fresh means thick with smoke, from peat fires, dung-scented breezes from nearby barns, and a general fog of don't breathe too deeply. Still, you open it. The chicken flaps away indignantly. You consider what sleeping in the woods might have been like instead. Sure, wolves. Sure, bandits. But at least you wouldn't wake up wondering if your pillow had legs. Suddenly, you hear a thud from the room next door, then a curse, then silence. You pause, wait, nothing, probably fine, or not. Either way, the walls are thin enough that if anything were wrong, you'd hear the screaming. You sit back on the bed, which releases a noise like a dying accordion. Your legs ache, your eyes burn. and it's not even dawn yet. This is the moment you start recalibrating your standards. Maybe the floor's not that bad. Maybe the bugs were just visiting. Maybe the chicken was an angel in disguise, here to warn you. But you know better. This place isn't just uncomfortable. It's designed to humble you, to remind you that in this world, comfort is a privilege. A bed isn't a sanctuary, it's a challenge. A gauntlet of straw, mites, and emotional damage. Even so, you start making mental adjustments. The next time you pass a clean inner, even a barn, you'll weep. You'll kiss the ground. But for now, you steel yourself. You have survived your first night in a medieval inn, but only barely. You think you've made it through the worst. The bed didn't consume you. The bugs, while persistent, didn't drag you into the mattress and absorb your soul. You stretch your aching back, roll your shoulders, and prepare for what you assume will be a simple morning routine. And then you open your door. Immediately, you're greeted by a sound you didn't expect. Snoring. But not from a single source, it's a chorus. A polyphonic drone of nasal distress rising from every direction. Down the hall, a man lies fully sprawled across the corridor floor, using a sack of barley as a pillow. His foot twitches with each breath. Behind him, another room has its door flung open, revealing two travelers in a bed meant for one, arms locked in what might be a hug, or possibly a slow-motion wrestling match. And you realize something crucial. There is no such thing as privacy in this inn. None. Last night you were too exhausted to care. But now, with the fog of sleep lifting and your senses alert again, the lack of boundaries slaps you across the face like a cold fish. Every sound echo chamber, pots being emptied, boots being laced, a woman somewhere in the building loudly clearing her throat like she's auditioning for a medieval opera. If you can hear them, they can hear you. There's no wall thick enough, no space far enough away. You pad downstairs, trying not to trip on the various human obstacles lying in your path. Once you hit the main floor, the full horror of communal life sets in. There is one bench for sitting, 2 mugs for drinking, 3 spoons for eating, and 12 people wanting breakfast. The air is thick with last night's stew, now congealed into something more closely resembling medieval glue. The innkeeper is busy refilling bowls with a ladle that looks like it was forged during the Black Death and never cleaned since. You grab a seat, only to find it already warm. You try not to think about why. A bowl of slop is pushed toward you. It smells grey. You dip your spoon and immediately regret it. Somewhere in there is a root vegetable, possibly 2. But there are also suspicious chunks that feel like meat and taste like sadness. There's no salt, no spice, and the texture hovers between pudding and regret. To your left, a man is slurping like a horse drinking from a bucket. To your right, someone wipes their nose on the sleeve of your tunic. You lock eyes with the innkeeper, who just raises a brow, like you are the problem. The truth is, privacy didn't mean the same thing in medieval times. Most travelers expected to share space, share meals, share beds. In some places, guests were even required to share their stories or their instruments, if they had one. The idea of a room of one's own was laughable unless you were wealthy or a member of the clergy. Even monks slept communally, shoulder to shoulder in cold, echoing dormitories. One quirky account from a 14th century French guest book describes an inn with 9 beds and 15 men, 4 chickens, 2 babies, and a goat. It does not say who slept where. Scholars still argue whether the goat counted as a paying customer or just a permanent fixture. As you try to finish your breakfast, a man belches next to you, loudly, then wipes his mouth with the same hand he used to adjust his foot wrappings. He offers you a bite of his bread. You decline. You scan the room and realize there's no place to retreat. Not upstairs, not down here, not even outside. The courtyard is filled with carts, livestock, and a few people who appear to be arguing about who stole whose pig. There is no quiet corner, no soft chair, no door that locks. And don't even think about going to the washroom, which, spoiler alert, doesn't exist. We'll get to that nightmare shortly. Right now, you've got bigger problems. Like the bard who's begun to play again. He's set up near the fireplace, plucking the same out-of-tune lute string he abused last night. His song is about a maiden, a knight, and something involving bread pudding. His voice cracks like old parchment, and you wonder how many people have plotted his demise over the years. You try to leave the room. Can't. The hallway's blocked. A merchant is loudly debating room rates with the innkeeper, waving a coin pouch and dropping names of nobles you're pretty sure he's never met. Someone bumps into you. No apology. Just a look that says, "This is life. Deal with it." And that's the medieval reality. There are no boundaries, no personal space, no dignity. Every cough is communal. Every breath is borrowed. Every bodily function, public domain. You escape back to your room and close the door. It doesn't latch. You try to shove a boot against it. Doesn't help. Through the crack, you see eyes. Just eyes. Someone walking by. They pause, then move on. Maybe. You sit on the edge of your bug-riddled bed and stare at your feet. One sock is missing. The other's damp. You feel like you're slowly dissolving. The candle you lit for light has dripped onto your only map. The parchment has curled inwards, like it too is giving up. This is not a place to rest. It's a place to survive. And you're not even halfway done. Eventually, hunger wrestles its way past your fear and common sense. You can't subsist on dread and stale air forever. The innkeeper shuffles toward you with what could generously be called a greener. Perhaps it's just his teeth attempting to escape. He points to the large pot at the center of the room and utters the ominous phrase, "Stew's ready." You join the queue of guests, eyeing the pot with equal parts suspicion and desperation. It sits like a sullen swamp in the hearth, the surface trembling every few seconds as something beneath bubbles to the top. You lean closer. There are chunks in iTunes identifiable, lumpy bits of mystery that could be meat, tuber, or the remnants of last night's stew. Actually, it might be last night's stew, or last week's. Historians still argue whether some medieval inns ever started fresh meals, or simply kept one eternal pot of stew simmering, feeding off itself like a culinary Ouroboros. Your turn comes. The innkeeper jabs a splintered ladle into the pot, swirls it around a few times like he's summoning something from the depth sand, slops the results into your bowl. You try not to look too closely. There's a stringy bit that resembles tendon, possibly rat, possibly not. You take a seat, hold your breath, and take a bite. It tastes beige. There's no better way to describe it. Just a vague warmth and the sense of something protein-adjacent clinging to your teeth. The bread you're given alongside it is a hard, dark loaf that doubles as a dental hazard. You bite in and hear something crack. You're not sure if it's the bread or your molar. There's no butter, no salt, no comfort, just obligation in edible form. This is where the medieval inn reveals its true betrayal. The food, far from being a respite, is often the most dangerous part. With no refrigeration, limited seasoning, and minimal hygiene, everything you eat carries the risk of turning your stomach into a battlefield. Botulism, ergot poisoning, rotten meat was a buffet of biological warfare. And still, you eat, slowly, methodically, trying not to think about the hair you just found. You tell yourself it's horsehair that somehow makes it better. The ale arrives. Warm, flat, possibly brewed in a barrel that used to hold fish. The foam is minimal and smells faintly of yeast and regret. You sip anyway, because, against all odds, it's safer than water. In many medieval inns, ale was the only liquid remotely safe to drink. The boiling during brewing killed off most of the pathogens, unlike the local water, which could contain everything from animal droppings to actual corpses upstream. One scholar even suggests that inn ale was so weak, it was considered more food than drink. You're not sure if that makes it better or worse. The conversation around you is less pleasant small talk and more a collection of disjointed sounds. A man with half an ear grumbles about road tolls. A traveller from the south mutters to himself while scratching an alarming rash. A woman with a voice like gravel debates loudly whether she should marry a tanner or just buy another pig. You wonder which option provides more emotional stability. Then, it happens. A gestrid-faced, clearly unwell suddenly stands and lurches toward the hearth. He opens his mouth as if to shout, then bends over and violently empties the contents of his stomach into the corner. It splashes, steams, and instantly clears a 10-foot radius. Everyone recoils. No one helps. The innkeeper sighs, walks over, and throws a handful of straw on the mess. Problem solved. You're halfway through your bowl. You put down your spoon. It occurs to you that you've never once seen the kitchen. No door leads to it. No cook appears. Maybe there is no kitchen. Maybe the stew just is. You lean back, hoping the ale will at least settle your stomach. That's when someone offers you a piece of salted pork. It's grey, riddled with suspicious veins, and smells like seawater and foot. You politely decline. The man shrugs and eats it anyway, with his fingers, then licks them, then pats you on the back. Your soul leaves your body for a moment. This inn isn't trying to poison you, but if it succeeds, well, that's your fault for being weak. A cat leaps onto the table beside you, scruffy, feral, one eye half closed with infection. It sniffs your bowl, sneezes directly into it, then saunters off. You push the bowl away, and yet, somehow, people around you seem content. They slurp, they chew, they laugh hoarsely through half-choked bites. For them, this is normal. This is sustenance. This is the best it gets. You wonder if you'll ever feel clean again. As the meal winds down, the innkeeper circles the room collecting coincer IOUs, or the occasional promise of labour. One man pays with a bundle of goose feathers, another offers a prayer. You hand over what you hope is enough coin, and try not to make eye contact. Your stomach churns. Maybe it's the stew. Maybe it's your own thoughts turning against you. Either way, you stand up slowly, trying not to tip anything over, or provoke the cat into another display of dominance. You head toward the corner, where a few guests are shuffling toward a rickety door that leads to, well, you're about to find out. You whisper a quiet wish to your intestines, because the worst is still to come. You reach the door with a sense of dread, the kind usually reserved for approaching guillotines or family reunions. The wooden plank is warped, water-stained, and adorned with a rusty latch that sticks when you try to lift it. Someone ahead of you coughs violently and stumbles out, eyes watering, muttering something about never again, and sweet St. Dunstan protect me. You brace yourself, exhale, and step into the latrine. The first thing to hit you is the smell. It is not merely unpleasant, it's existential. It wraps around your face like a hot, wet blanket laced with despair. You gag instinctively, but there's no fresh air to be had. This is a place where all other scents come to die. Even the fleas avoid it. The walls are splintered, blackened with moisture and soot. The floorboards are damp, not from water, but from generations of misfires and spills. The toilet is a hole, literally a hole, carved into a wooden bench, precariously suspended over a pit, whose depths you cannot see, and whose contents you do not want to know. You can hear them, though, bubbling, shifting, groaning like some buried demon digesting the sins of man. You edge closer, trying not to breathe. There is no paper, no cloth, just a communal rag hanging from a hookray, frayed, damp, possibly alive. You take a step back. In wealthier towns, some inns were lucky enough to have garderobes, vertical shafts that dropped waste into pits or even straight into the moat outside. Historians still argue whether those moats were ever truly defensive, just open-air sewers masquerading as military architecture. Here, though, there's no such engineering, just a pit and a prayer. You go quickly, balancing like a circus performer on a surface that creaks under your weight. You keep one hand on the wall, the other gripping your belt. Every sound feels like a death knell. You finish with as much dignity as possible, which is to say, none, and make your exit without looking back. There's no wash basin, no water, just a small clay bowl with something floating in it that might have once been soap, now melted into goo. You scrape some of it onto your hands, rub furiously, and wipe your palms on your tunic with a sigh that feels older than time. Back in the hallway, you notice other guests making the same grim journey. They exit the latrine pale, twitchy, and a little broken. One woman mumbles a hymn. Another man appears to have vomited into his own sleeve. You realize the inn's true genius isn't in how it welcomes guests, but in how it grinds them down until they stop expecting anything. It's around this time you start to wonder what kind of diseases you've just exposed yourself to. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, take your pick. In the medieval world, sanitation was more concept than practice. Inns often reused the same rag for cleaning everything from mugs to wounds to the toilet wall. One innkeeper's manual from the 15th century even described slop duties as something to be delegated to the blind or very young. Optimistic, if horrifying. There's a fringe theory that some medieval inns deliberately maintained disgusting latrines to encourage guests to leave early. Fewer guests meant fewer mouths to feed. You can't prove that's true, but it certainly feels plausible. Back in the common room, someone offers you a boiled egg. You decline with a haunted look. The bard is back at it, this time tuning his lute with the finesse of a barn owl. The song he sings is cheerier now, about love blooming in spring, and something called fennel wine. But the mood is still thick with the scent of latrine and stew. You consider stepping outside to get some air, but the sky has opened up into a fine medieval drizzle. Rain in these parts doesn't fill its seeps. The ground is a slow-moving soup of filth and boot prints. A donkey brays in the courtyard, the only creature here that seems to be enjoying itself. You return to your room, because at this point it's the least disgusting place available. You shove the door shut, wedge the chair under the handle, and collapse onto your straw-stuffed purgatory. You itch immediately. Your skin crawls, but you endure, because enduring is the only choice left. Lying there, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling, you start to piece together a kind of grim admiration for the people who travelled in this world daily. Merchants, pilgrims, messengers. They endured this regularly. No wonder so many letters never arrived. The real miracle wasn't the message, it was that the courier survived the inn. You try to sleep again, briefly. The noise from downstairs never really fades. A new fight erupts. Something breaks. Laughter follows. Then more coughing. You try to focus on your breathing, like that monk once taught you, but the memory is drowned out by the thudding boots of someone stomping up the stairs, swearing in Old English. You close your eyes and dream of toilets that flush. You wake, not from rest, but from survival. Your eyes crusted, your muscles knotted, your soul frayed like the edge of that communal latrine rag. The smell hasn't left your nosino. It's taken up residence. You blink hard, hoping the daylight might offer mercy. It doesn't. Light barely filters through the window horn, smearing everything in a jaundiced hue. You roll off the mattress and feel the unmistakable tickle of something skittering away under the straw. You don't investigate. You've learned by now that ignorance is a powerful survival tool. You stretch, your bones cracking like dry firewood, and open your door in time to see a figure slumped against the wall face down, unmoving. It could be a very deep sleep, or not. No one around you seems particularly concerned. In fact, one guest steps over the body while munching on a turnip. You make your way downstairs, hoping the worst is behind you. It isn't. Breakfast is being served again, if you can call it that. A grey mash is ladled into bowls, something between porridge and cement. It smells faintly of oat, faintly of mildew, and strongly of regret. You sit across from a man who grins through several missing teeth and says, "Bit more weevils in it today. Good for the blood." You nod weakly, stirring the sludge until a bug floats to the top. You push the bowl away and lie to yourself that the ale will hold you over. But just as you begin to sip your watery, tepid mug of safety fluid, the innkeeper approaches. He leans over, smelling of smoked fish and disappointment, and grunts, "Latrines blocked." You blink. You're not a guest anymore. You're staff. And just like that, the inn presses its thumb further into your bruised dignity. This isn't a hotel. It's an ecosystem, twisted balance of chores, barter, and submission. If you can't pay or if your payment was light, you're expected to make up the difference. Scrubbing pots, hauling buckets, unblocking the latrine. You eye the innkeeper. He doesn't blink. The longer you sit, the more obvious it becomes that refusal is not an option. The bucket is handed to you half full of something thick and sloshing. You swallow down your pride with a bit of bile and follow the groans of the latrine pit. What awaits you is beyond description. But let's try. The wooden bench has caved in on one side, forming a treacherous slope into the abyss. The waste below has risen to an alarming level, sluggish and bubbling. You set to work, scooping, gagging, repeating. It's wet. It's warm. It's unholy. Your hands, though covered, feel unclean in a way that soap alone cannot absolve. And it isn't even noon. At some point during this ritual of horror, a rat scampers past your boot. It stops, looks at you, and you swear shakes its head before vanishing into a wall. Even the rats have standards. By the time you're finished and return to the common room, the other guests barely glance at you. You're no longer one of them. You're part of the building now. Another shape that lurks around corners, bleary-eyed and overworked. You slump into a chair by the fire. Someone hands you a hunk of bread without speaking. You take it, grateful, and chew. It's dry, tasteless, and hard enough to chip a bicuspid, but it's yours. That's when the merchant at the next table leans in and begins talking. At first, you nod politely, but then his story spirals. He tells you about the innkeeper's brother, how he vanished last winter, about a guest who never checked out, about noises in the cellar, about the strange stains behind the bar that no one will clean. You assume it's just drunken rambling, until the innkeeper walks past, and the merchant falls dead silent. You notice others looking away, eyes lowered, shoulders tense. This place has secrets. Historians still argue whether some inns doubled as criminal hideouts, but there's compelling evidence that several were fronts for organized theft, even murder. A few records describe death inns, along remote roads, where travelers checked in and never checked out robbed, disposed of, their belongings sold by morning. You glance around, and suddenly notice the mismatched boots beside the hearth, the fine cloak hanging on a peg, too rich for any guest here, a ring on the barmaid's finger that looks suspiciously like it was never meant for her, and the body in the hallway upstairs? Still there, covered now by a ragged cloak. No one has moved it. You excuse yourself quietly, and retreat to your room, heart pounding, suddenly hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards. You thought the bugs were the worst part. You thought the latrine was the final insult. But now, as the sun slants through the greasy horn window, you realize this inn has many layers and you're stuck in the middle. And night is coming again. You sit on the edge of your straw-stuffed torment, knees bouncing slightly, ears twitching at every floorboard creak. It's afternoon now, but the inn has taken on a strange, too quiet. Not peaceful, just waiting. You've been inside long enough to sense the mood, shifting like damp timber under a boot. Something in the air feels off, like the inn itself is holding its breath. You peer down the corridor. The body from earlier has been moved, not removed, moved. Now it's half tucked into a storage alcove beneath the stairs, feet still sticking out like a pair of sad broom handles. No one speaks of it. No one seems surprised. It's just a thing that happens here. You venture downstairs, drawn by the flicker of firelight and the soft rumble of conversation. The innkeeper is polishing a tankard with a cloth that looks like it's also used to wipe boots. His eyes track your movements with the faintest suggestion of a smirk. It doesn't reach his mouth, or his soul. You pull up a stool and ask for something stronger. He pours you a drink, without speaking. It's thick, brown, and smells faintly of turpentine. You sip. Your tongue tries to flee your mouth. It fails. And then he leans in. "You staying another night?" he asks, voice as smooth as gravel in stew. You stutter a reply, something non-committal and harmless. But it's too late. The question wasn't really a question. You've been marked, labelled, counted. Now you start noticing details you didn't catch before, like the trapdoor behind the hearth, almost perfectly disguised in the floorboards, but just uneven enough to be visible to someone desperate. Or the door behind the bar that doesn't quite match the inn's medieval layout, too narrow, too reinforced. Or the large iron hook hanging beside the cellar entrance. One guest, a gaunt man in a tattered red tunic, shuffles by with a limp and doesn't meet your eyes. He's been here longer than anyone, and yet you never see him eat, or sleep, or leave. The innkeeper follows your gaze. "Don't mind him. Harmless," he says, the way someone might say dormant. And that's when the question worms its way into your brain, ugly and undeniable. How many people who stay here leave on their own 2 feet? The records are unreliable. Most medieval inns didn't keep guest books. Travel was dangerous. Bandits roamed. Disappearances were common. Who would think twice if a pilgrim never arrived at Canterbury? Maybe they got lost, or died of plague, or maybe, just maybe, they fell asleep in the wrong bed under the wrong roof. Historians still debate whether innkeepers were ever truly the villains some legends painted them to be, but scrolls tell of inns with trapdoors beneath the straw beds, leading to shafts below, of travellers who vanished, and whose possessions mysteriously reappeared in the local markets. You feel your stomach lurch, not from food this time, from instinct. The barmaid walks by, her smile mechanical, her eyes blank. She hums a tune that doesn't match her expression. You've heard it before, somewhere deep in the woods, wolves howling perhaps. The door creaks open. A new traveller enters, soaked from the rain. He's greeted with a warmth you never received. His coin purse jingles. Everyone hears it. You sip the last of your drink. It tastes like wet iron and boiled despair. The walls seem closer now. The fire burns low, and the smoke has a greenish tinge. You consider leaving. Right now, before nightfall. But when you stand, a hand lands on your shoulder. The innkeeper again. His grip is firm. Too firm. "Storm's picking up," he says, voice dipped in oil. "Best stay in. Safer here." You glance out the smeared horn window. It's true, the sky is blackening, thunder already curling across the hills. But it still feels like the lesser risk. You retreat to your room, heart pounding. The hallways are empty now. Your door doesn't lock. You wedge a stool beneath the handle, push your bag against it, then lean your back against the wall and listen. The wind howls outside, but it's not loud enough to cover the noise of footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy. Then a whisper. Then laughter. Not joyful laughter tight. Strangled, unwell. And worst of all, the door creaks open slightly. Just a hair. The latch still pressed down from inside. But no one entered. You freeze. Don't breathe. Minutes pass. Then, an hour. No more footsteps. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift into an uneasy sleep, curled up like an animal, still clothed, boots on, knife in hand. You dream of being watched, because maybe you are. You wake before dawn, not because of any rooster, not because of the light there is none, but because of something deeper, an instinct, a bone-deep signal that whispers, you shouldn't be here anymore. Your back aches. Your clothes are damp with sweat, or possibly rainwater from the leak you didn't notice overnight. Your hands fumble for your bag. You don't remember falling asleep, but you do remember the door creaking. It's shut now, but not how you left it. The stool you wedged under the handle is gone moved quietly, precisely. Your pack has shifted an inch from where you placed it, and on the straw near the door, unmistakably, a damp boot print. Not yours. You sit up slowly, heart thudding, ears open to every noise, but the inn is quiet. Too quiet. That silence again, not peaceful, but poised, like the moment before a blade drops. You pull on your cloak, sling your bag over one shoulder, and creep into the hallway. The door clicks softly behind you, and that tiny sound feels enormous. Every step echoes down the warped corridor. There's no sign of life, no candlelight, no breakfast stew steaming from below, just shadow and stale air. As you descend the stairs, the hairs on your arms stand up. It's not fear. It's certainty. You are no longer a guest here. You are a question waiting to be answered. In the common room, the hearth has gone cold. The chairs are empty. The tankards untouched. The bard's lute lies broken across a bench. There's no innkeeper, no barmaid. Just that same faint scent of smoke and something metallic beneath it. And then, you see it. The trapdoor behind the hearth is open. You should keep walking. Out the door, into the storm if you must. But you can't help yourself. You step closer, peer inside. A ladder descends into darkness. You smell damp stone, rotting fabric, and something sourer, something you hope is just old meat. You drop a coin into the hole. It hits something soft. No echo. You back away. Now you're certain of it. This place has eaten people. It's one of the whispered truths of the road. In an age without central authority, without traveller protections, isolated inns became flexible. If a guest had no family, no connections, no one waiting at the other end, well, what harm in keeping his purse and turning him into stew meat for the next night's guests? A bit of extra income, a bit of salt, a secret everyone agreed not to know. Fringe chroniclers describe hospitality murders in hushed Latin. One monk referred to a tavern near Bruges, where travellers were stripped of purse, pulse and peace before sunrise. Historians still debate how common these killings were, but they occurred enough to leave a pattern anxiety woven into every folk tale about sleeping far from home. And you've stumbled straight into that pattern. Your boots creak as you step away from the hearth. The door to the inn is slightly ajar now. You didn't hear it open. No wind blew it. It simply is. You step toward it, then stop. A shadow stands outside, too still, too tall. A figure, draped in something dark and heavy, like a cloak soaked in pitch. They're not knocking, not moving, just waiting. You inch to the side, out of the line of sight, trying not to breathe too loudly. But your lungs are panicking now, burning behind your ribs. Your brain screams, go back upstairs, hide, but your heart knows that's worse. You don't want to be caught in this place when it wakes up again. Then, footsteps, behind you, on the stairs. Slow, Deliberate, one at a time. You bolt not toward the shadow outside, but toward the stable, out the side door, through the muddy courtyard, past the cart with the sagging wheel, and the drunk who never seemed to move. He's gone now, or maybe he never existed. The stable reeks of old hay and damp horse. You fumble with the tack, find your gear, don't bother saddling, just grab the reins, haul the sleepy beast outside, and jump on. You ride hard, out the gate, down the road, through the fog. The wind slaps your face, mixing with the tears you didn't know you were shedding. The landscape passes in smears, trees, rocks, the distant glint of dawn breaking over the hills. You don't look back until you're miles away. And even then, the inn's not visible anymore, like it was never there, just mist and silence. You stop in a village just after sunrise. A local blacksmith eyes your muddy boots and pale face, asks no questions. You pay for a bench to sit on, a crust of bread, and the kind of ale that feels like it can scrape fear off your bones. Someone else at the table mentions the inn, the one by the old Roman road. Still standing? They mutter. You nod, barely. Strange. Thought it burned down last spring. You don't say anything, just chew your bread and stare into your drink. Because the inn is behind you now, and you're still alive, which, in the medieval world, is no small victory. The road stretches ahead, rutted and slick with last night's storm. Your horse plods forward, exhausted, head low, breath steaming in the early morning chill. You don't push it. You're just grateful it didn't collapse under you during that panicked flight from the inn. Your limbs ache, your clothes are soaked through, and every bounce of the saddle sends tiny reminders that straw bedding and horror-filled nights do not leave the body quickly. You pass a shrine nailed to a trean old, moss-covered cross draped with ribbons and chicken bones. You nod to it, not because you believe it'll help, but because suddenly you feel like angering the local spirits would be the least wise move imaginable. After some miles, you come upon a small settlement, not even a village, really just a few cottages, a smithy, and a tavern with a thatched roof that leans like it's trying to whisper something to the ground. You tie your horse and step inside, stiff and wary. It's different here, brighter, warmer. A woman behind the counter nods at you but doesn't stare. The bread smells like it was baked this week, not in the last century. There's a fire going, and it doesn't reek of burning dung. You dare to hope, just a little. As you sip something resembling soup and chew a heel of bread that doesn't break your molars, you overhear two travellers talking in hushed voices, not about bandits, not about taxes, about disappearances. People who stayed in the wrong places, people who never showed up where they were expected. One man describes a friend who checked into a roadside inn and was never seen again. Another mutters that some inns were once rumoured to trap travellers, the ones with no family, no coin, and nothing to lose. They lower their voices, glancing at you. You look away, not out of rudeness but recognition. You've lived the tale. You finish your food and pay with trembling fingers. You decide to rest, briefly, then move on. And as you prepare to leave, you see it. A faded flyer nailed to a post near the road. It's a notice. Missing persons. 3 names. A merchant, a pilgrim, a wandering healer. All last seen travelling near the old Roman road. You don't know what to do. You consider warning someone, telling them what you saw. But what did you see, really? No one actually tried to kill you. No one dragged you into a cellar. No blood. No direct threat. But the evidence whispered from every creaking floorboard, from every missing guest, from that shadow at the door. You ride on, haunted. In the days ahead, you pass other inns. Some look cosy. Others look worse than the one you barely escaped. You eye each of them with suspicion. You inspect the roofs, the firewood stacks, the people lounging outside. One in particular catches your attention. It's well maintained, has a painted sign, clean windows, but something about it feels too perfect, too inviting. You keep riding, because now you know. It's not always the dirtiest inns that are dangerous. Sometimes the clean ones are the most practiced, the most professional, the ones that know how to erase a guest completely. You camp outside more often now, in the woods, under trees. It's cold, wet, uncomfortable, but it's yours. You've traded splinters and stew for wind and solitude, for peace, at least in pieces. Eventually, Word reaches your ears of a tax official found dead in an inn not far from where you fled. Rumors say he choked. Others say he was poisoned. The body was burned before a priest could even bless it. You feel your pulse spike. But no one mentions arrests. No trials. Just silence. Because inns, in this world, are beyond law. They're liminal. Spaces of transition, secrecy, and opportunism. Everyone needs them. Everyone fears them. Historians often describe them as the heart of medieval travel. But that heart, you now realize, sometimes beat with darker blood. And you, lucky or cursed, made it out. Just once. You ride on, the countryside unfolding before you in wide, wet sheets of green and brown. The land here is all mud and stone, hedgerows winding like half-finished thoughts between wind-bent trees. Your thoughts drift in time with the rhythm of your horse's hoover slosh. Squelch, slosh over packed earth, and puddles deep enough to reflect your unease. By now, your day's removed from that inn. You've passed through forests of whispering ash trees, over hills speckled with sheep, and across meadows where the fog clings to the grass like old stories that won't let go. Yet the memory remains. It follows you, lurking behind each village sign, echoing in the hollow silence of every footstep. And it's not just the fear of what was, it's the fear of what might have been. Because in truth, you don't know how close you came to joining the long list of names whispered in roadside taverns and scratched onto crude memorials near crossroads. Maybe they weren't going to kill you. Maybe they just wanted your coin. Maybe they were just peculiar, private, unwashed folk. But you've seen enough, felt enough, to know that evil in the medieval world didn't always come with horns and declarations. Sometimes it came with a smile and a bowl of soup. You stop for the night in a barn. No inn. Never again. Not unless you can see the kitchen and touch the back wall with your own hand. The farmer who owns the barn barely glances at you. You offer a few coppers, and he waves you toward the hay without so much as a grunt. You wrap yourself in your cloak and lie down near a cow, chewing with soft, indifferent noises. You feel safer here beside a beast that only wants grass and a warm place to sleep. Safer than in a place designed for human comfort. Because now you know, the design means nothing. What matters is intent, and you no longer trust the smiles of strangers who pour drinks and offer beds. As darkness drapes over the countryside like a wool shroud, you stare up at the rafters and think about all the travellers who weren't so lucky. Not famous ones, not kings or knights, just people like you, merchants, messengers, pilgrims with sore feet and empty bellies, people who needed rest, who walked into buildings with signs of hospitality hanging overhead, who never walked out again. The records of the time barely acknowledged them. A missing person was not a scandal. It was a shrug. There were no newspapers, no alert systems. If you vanished, maybe someone in your home village lit a candle. Maybe. But usually, life went on. Crops needed tending. Bread needed baking. And so the list of the lost grew. You shift on the straw. Scratch at your collar. Something has bitten you again, flea or hay mite, it's hard to tell. You don't even care anymore. Compared to what you've endured, it feels like a kiss on the cheek. It's the comfort of predictability. This barn may be drafty. The cow may fart in her sleep. But you'll wake up. You're sure of that. In the morning, you head out early. Mist hangs low, your breath puffing in white clouds as the sun yawns over the horizon. You chew on hard bread, while your horse clips along at a steady pace. And in your mind, you begin to think about why inns were the way they were. Not just that one. All of them. Medieval inns weren't designed for your comfort. They were businesses, yes, but only barely. Most were run by families scraping out a living from tired travellers, and the margins were thin. Food had to stretch. Beds were shared. Security was a suggestion, not a guarantee. Privacy didn't exist. And the line between innkeeper and opportunist was thinner than a monk's hair shirt. You didn't book a room, you took your chances. And sometimes, those chances took you. Even the law was foggy when it came to inns. Depending on the region and the century, some were regulated, others not at all. In many cases, the church or local lords owned the land, but they didn't care who ran the place so long as taxes were paid. So anyone could open an inn. Anyone with a building and a sign and a pot big enough to feed stew to 10. And once inside, travellers were at their mercy. If the ale was bad, you still drank. If the stew was laced with meat that moved on its own, you still ate. And if the bed had more teeth than a dog, you still slept because the road was worse. That was the contract. Accept the lesser evil, or face the greater one. You signed with your presence, not your pen. Scholars still debate whether most inns were truly dangerous, or if modern minds romanticize the fear. Some argue that tales of murderous innkeepers were just exaggerations, morality tales, meant to teach pilgrims humility. Others dig deeper, pointing to court records and local legends. A tavern outside York that burned down with a dozen guests locked inside. An inn near Paris, where skeletal remains were found in the floorboards. A border town lodging house, where travellers always seemed to leave their belongings behind. Coincidence or cautionary history? You don't care about the academic debates. You lived the feeling, and that's more truth than any scroll can contain. By midday, you reach a larger town. Stone buildings, merchants shouting in the square, a church bell ringing like a heartbeat. You feel the old comfort trying to return. This place has law, order, market stalls. There's even a guild-run inn that boasts clean sheets and a private room. And yet, you hesitate. The idea of a soft bed calls to you, yes. But so does the memory of those eyes peeking through the cracked door. That trap door, the smell, the silence. You take your bread to the church steps and sit in the sun instead. Across the square, a finely dressed traveller exits the guild inn. He stretches, content, laughs. His purse jingles. He has not known your fear. He has not seen what's behind the hearth in places where no one checks. You wonder how long that man will live. And then you wonder something else. How many other survivors are out here? People like you, silent, cautious, burned by straw and stew and shadows. You scan the crowd, every dirty traveller, every pilgrim with eyes that flinch when a door creaks. You see your kin in them now. Because once you've stayed in a medieval inn the wrong kind, you don't unsee it. You just learn to walk around it. You've been on the road for weeks now. Maybe months. It's hard to keep track. Days blur together when you spend them avoiding anything with a swinging sign or a promise of warm beds and hot meals. You've learned to read the land the way an old soldier reads faces. Every crooked chimney, every overgrown path, every innkeeper's grin hides a story, and you're no longer interested in being a character in one. You sleep in barns, under hedges, sometimes not at all, but you wake up every time, and that alone has become its own kind of luxury. One evening, you find yourself walking alongside a caravan of peddlers heading toward a summer fair. Their carts rattle with pots and tin charms. They laugh, drink, and swap tales as easily as breathing. You keep to the side, listening but quiet. Then one of them turns to you and says, "You look like someone who's seen things." You hesitate, then nod. He leans in. "You ever stayed at the Grinning Fox? Just off the Roman road?" Your mouth drees. The others around the fire grow quiet. One woman speaks up. "My cousin went through there, said she got a room with no windows, and when she woke up, her boots were gone, and someone cut her hair while she slept." Another adds, "My uncle swears they serve man, flesh stew, always claims he found a tooth in his bowl." They laugh nervously. You don't, because now you know that sometimes the stories aren't just stories. Sometimes they're warnings wrapped in humor-palatable fear, to help people sleep a little easier. You wait until the fire burns low. Then you excuse yourself and walk into the trees, lay your cloak on a patch of moss, and sleep under the stars. No roof, no walls, no eyes, behind a latchless door. And in your dreams, you revisit that inn again. Not as it was, but worse. Bigger, endless. Each room connected to another by corridors that twist in impossible directions. Trapdoors open onto staircases. Hallways loop back to your own bed. The stew in your bowl ripples, and faces rise from the surface. The innkeeper leans in, whispering, "One more night." You wake with your heart pounding, dew clinging to your cloak. The sun is rising, golden and quiet. And you understand, the worst part of that place wasn't the bugs, or the stew, or the latrine. It wasn't even the implication of violence. It was the feeling of helplessness. The moment you realized you weren't just uncomfortable, you were trapped. That you had entered a space designed to hold you, feed off you, and never ever let you leave the same person you were before. Because that's what real horror does. It rewrites you. You're not the same traveller now. You pass inns without stopping. You carry flint, hard bread, and your own cup. You make your own fire, and walk a little farther each day just to sleep beside a tree instead of a wall that listens. And one day, as you're sitting by a brook, washing the dust from your boots, A boy from a nearby hamlet runs up to you. He's breathless, eyes wide, waving a crude map. "Is this the right way to the Grinning Fox?" he asks. They say it's cheaper than the Guild Inn, and the stew's thicker. You feel your throat tighten. You look at his eager face, at the mud on his boots, the coin pouch barely tied to his belt, and for the first time since you fled that place, you speak about it. Not in a whisper, not with humor, just the truth. You tell him not to go, that there are places where people vanish, where a smile means hunger, where a warm bed is a trap laid soft. His face shifts. He listens. Maybe he believes you, maybe not. But when he walks away, he does it slowly, thoughtfully, and just maybe, you've spared someone else from the same night you endured. You sit back down at the brook, the water trickling over stones, and let your breath finally steady. You don't need comfort anymore. You need truth, and you carry that with you. Every step, every night, every time you choose the cold ground over the warmth of a roof you don't trust. Because now you know the real reason you shouldn't stay in a medieval inn, and you'll never forget it. The fire's out now. The night outside is quiet, with only the hum of wind through leaves and the soft shuffle of your blanket as you shift to find that final comfortable spot. You're safe, here in your bed, far from smoky hearths and sloshing latrines, far from those trapdoor shadows and scraping footsteps in the night. The inn is behind you, a bad memory, a dream receding into the distance. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Feel the warmth of your sheets, the hush of stillness settling in around you like a soft mist. Your hands are clean. Your pillow is yours. No fleas, no stew, no half-heard whispers echoing through a thin wood wall. You made it through. Sometimes history isn't just about kings and castles, it's about the small things. A bowl of soup, a damp bed, the feel of a lock that doesn't work, and the resilience of people, like you, who got up, walked out, and kept going anyway. So rest now. There's no one watching, no eyes behind a door, just you, and sleep, and the steady drift of time pulling you deeper into dreams. Good night.